Okay. Welcome to the RAMP webinars. This is the third component of the RAMP application, School Counseling Program Goals. I'm Mark Kranz.
And I'm Karen Griffith.
And we want you to know that program goals are valued up to 6 points. Each component of RAMP has a different value. Goals is the highest of all the components, so it's a very important component of RAMP. So you can receive a score from 1 to 6. We want to tell you that when you are applying for RAMP, you want to check the website and make sure you're using the most current RAMP rubric. Not that it changes on a monthly basis, but sometimes there are changes or it's tweaked. So just make sure you're going to the website and using the latest version. And if the RAMP rubric were to change, there'd be some minor adjustments. It really wouldn't impact the content or the procedures of this webinar. You know, what we are trying to help you kind of think through and what we're trying to help you to kind of recognize as important in this process, it really won't change. And again, I want to say that the RAMP rubric really needs to guide your application. You want to look at what the RAMP rubric is saying you need to include and what you need to address. It's very clear.
So the school counseling program goals are incredibly significant in the overall process of the application, as well as a significant part of a comprehensive counseling program. They set the stage for everything that follows. So this requires you to spend some time and get it right, because if you get the goals right, the rest will fall into place. When the goals are problematic, the rest of the application, the rest of delivery becomes a little more difficult and more challenging. So goals set the stage. They drive almost everything else we do. They're going to drive your mindsets and behaviors. They're going to drive your action plans. They're going to drive your results reports. They're going to drive everything. They represent what you do each year, some intentional focus, and it's worth the time to spend to get them correct.
So on the Ask a National Model, page 27, references goals, and then in the Ask a National Model implementation guide, pages 36 to 37, will give you lots of examples and some additional information about writing solid goals. So the goals of the school counseling program, when you look at the bullets here, they're about what you want at the end of the day. It's answering the so what question. So you've done core curriculum, you've done small groups, and what's the outcome of that? And that's what the goal does. The goal describes what you want to have as an outcome, and it also talks about how you're going to be able to evaluate whether or not, or how closely you met, or what was the progress in terms of getting to that outcome. They're based on achievement, attendance, and behavior. That's really important, that they're linked, that program goals that you share in the RAMP application, you have to share 2 to 3, that these link to achievement, attendance, and behavior. Written in a SMART goal format, and you will see that slide later on. You know your goals are based on some information that is relevant to your school. So they're based on your school data profile. They're based on from information you get out of the student information. They may be enhanced by some survey you do with stakeholders to talk about concerns or needs or hopes and dreams that stakeholders have for their students. They're not written and then done for the next 5 years. They're reevaluated and updated each year. You may do a same goal from year to year, but again, you're able to provide the rationale for why you're continuing to highlight that goal. And then when we talk about global or targeted, I'm going to kind of reference Karen.
Sure. So global might be when you're talking about a goal for the entire building. So even goals that you repeat from year to year are going to have current annual data affiliated with them. So it's always for this year. So you might do a goal for all third graders, but only if the data continues to tell you that all third graders need that particular thing. A targeted goal is a little more specific and can focus interventions, attention, measurements around a smaller subgroup within the building. Either is acceptable. It's all about using the data in attendance, achievement, and behavior to develop and discern the needs in your building and then write specific goals around them.
So the rubric is very clear that the goal needs to address achievement, attendance, behavior, or school safety. You have to be able to clearly communicate that's based on data. So we're moving away from, well, this is what we've always done. We're moving away from, I like doing this. The kids have fun. The teachers enjoy it. It needs to be based on a need that is articulated through your student information system or your student data or your data profile. It can address policies, practices, closing the gap issues. They can be geared to academics, the academic, career, social, personal social development. You do not need to write a goal for each of the domains. You could write 3 goals that address academics. You could write 2 goals that address career. It is really driven by the needs as established by the data in your building. And you have to prioritize which ones are going to be the most important and the most impactful. Which ones are the greatest need that have a kind of a sense of urgency. We need to address this starting today.
And be careful when you're developing goals around policies, practices, or the 3 domains, because even those goals must be grounded in data that goes back to achievement, attendance, and behavior. Career goals can certainly be linked to achievement. Students who come to school probably have better plans or more articulated plans for future career opportunities. Personal social certainly links to behavior and school safety. So even when you're addressing policies, practices, you're looking at things that are grounded in data and that might be creating barriers for all students or some students to achieve in those 3 areas.
And then they're written on a SMART goal. We can measure them so we can see a change. They're attainable. That we actually can accomplish this. They're focused on results, and they're time bound.
So there's some do's and don'ts, and these are taken from the National Model Implementation Guide. You can reference page 38 to see the full list. So on the do side, I want you to make sure that you're focused on achievement, attendance, and/or behavioral data. And when we're talking about behavioral data, we're talking about the hard data around student behaviors. Typically, this references school discipline records, consequences that are delivered to children, offenses that are recorded, who's being referred, and they address significant needs in your building. Again, we're going to stay with the achievement, attendance, and behavior, but these are significant needs. You can't be focused on everything. You have to do some triage, choose what's most important. That SMART format matters, and we want them to be meaningful and significant so that if you accomplish it, it's going to matter to everyone in the building. And on the don't side, you really cannot base your goals on things beyond achievement, attendance, or behavioral data. They have to focus on those 3 things. This is going to be a theme that's going to get repeated on virtually every slide. And then don't omit any component of the SMART format. There are some templates available through ASCA that ensure that all of the pieces are included. The more clearly and specifically you write your goal, the easier it is to understand what you're trying to accomplish and know when you've accomplished it, if you've accomplished it.
So one of the pieces that's part of this section is beginning to create a school data profile. We provided a template here, and it's really important that you recognize that this is a template. Templates can be adjusted. They can be customized to fit the needs of your building, of your site. But the intent here is to create a profile over time so you can see the patterns and maybe recognize the red flags that are happening with kids. Now, we believe that everyone should do the first part of this template. The enrollment. What's the total enrollment? How many are gifted? How many are ESOL, special ed? How many might be girls? How many might be boys? You can disaggregate it, break it up into parts any way you like. You're going to be looking at African American, Latino, Native American, Asian, Pacific Islanders. There's lots of ways to break your data down. We're not saying you have to use them all. We're saying that you want to break it down because it's going to help you be much more intentional and meaningful in your goal development. Now, we gave you examples of how you can take that enrollment data and then break it down into significant data points within your school. Might be dropout, might be graduation rate. Well, if I'm an elementary school counselor, I'm not going to necessarily start with breaking down the graduation rate. It might be attendance. You might do enrollment, and the very first year you do the data profile, pick attendance and break it down and disaggregate it. And then next year add behavior. So it's intended to help you build over time a picture of what is happening with your students in your building. You get to customize it. It looks intimidating at first, but please don't let that keep you from using this. This is a really excellent artifact to share in the upload in the application to demonstrate that your goals were really reflective of the needs and the priorities in your school, on your site. Here we have the SMART goal format. I think this is not new for folks, and so it gives you, when we say it's attainable, we give you some bullet points to think about. We don't want to make the goal so easy that it doesn't really have much significance for folks, but we don't want to make it so unreachable that you get so overwhelmed and so discouraged that it shuts you down either. So it's obviously a professional judgment. But our suggestion is when you're writing the goals, use this as a reflective piece. Is it specific? Can you provide a rationale for why am I doing this? What's the reasons? What's the purpose? So it's again a tool to help you write really focused, intentional, powerful goals.
So this is one format that can help you be sure that all of the pieces are in your SMART goal. So just to go through it, that first blank is the end date. That might be the end of first semester, the end of second semester, or the end of the school year. This is at what point are you going to stop and determine whether or not you achieve this goal. It's the end date. The next blank is where you provide a description of the identified students who are needing some sort of intervention. This might be all third graders, or it might be students who performed at a particular level on a particular test, or it might be students who have missed a certain number of days of school. But you are going to very clearly describe for this intervention on this. And they're either going to increase or decrease something. And you're going to describe on the next very long blank, what is it that you hope that they will increase or decrease or whatever it is. Are they going to reduce the number of absences? Are they going to reduce the number of unexcused absences? Are you going to move students from a proficient level to an exemplary level on a state test? Are you going to increase GPAs of a particular population? Be very descriptive on that line. And then by blank percent. This is just where you're going to identify your measure of change. You're going to improve by 10%. You're going to improve by 50%. Again, you want this to be reasonable. And then to make it easy on you so that you can know what you're measuring, the best goals are going to include baseline and target data. So you might say that you're going to improve the attendance going rate by 10% from 180 absences accumulated by students in the first semester to 160 absences accumulated by students in the second. Line to target tells you exactly what you're going to measure. The baseline, what you know at the beginning, the target, what's your final measure at the end.
So this is really important. So let me just give you one more example. One more example, you might identify, eighth graders who you are worried about when they transition into the high school. And the reason you're worried about them is you're looking at their grades. And you're saying, I have 20 eighth graders who, when I put them together in a group, they have 30 total Fs. And you're worried about these kids moving on because they've established behaviors and some pattern that aren't going to serve them well. So the baseline would not be the 30 students in this case. It would be those 20 students, I'm sorry. It would be the total number of Fs this group of identified kids have. It's 30. What percentage do you want to reduce that by? Maybe we say, just so we can do the math in our head, 50%. So we're going to go from 30, that's the baseline. The target would be 50% fewer, which is half, right? So that would be 15. So we're going from 30 to 15. And like Karen said, at the end of the 10 weeks or at the end of the quarter, whenever you decide this intervention ends, you're going to be able to say, okay, we started with 30. We can count up at this point how many Fs we have, and you'll be able to easily compute the measure of change.
This is just another template that's available. It's found in the National Model Implementation Guide, and it does exactly the same thing. Gives you the blank spaces on which you write the components of the SMART goal, and then it asks you some questions for how you're going to use this goal to drive your further interventions. The first question is, what's the clear outcome data that you're using? Again, it's just asking you to clearly identify what are you measuring. That second point is extremely important, and it's asking you to identify the supporting contextual data from the relevant stakeholders. So, for example, you might identify that same group of eighth graders who made a cumulative 30 Fs during that time frame. So you're going to talk to their teachers, you're going to talk to their parents, you're going to talk to the students, and you're going to find out what contributed to those Fs. What was it that the students believed led them to making Fs, that the teachers believed yielded Fs in the students, that the parents believed. That piece is incredibly important so that you know how to target your interventions. You have to understand the context in which that data occurred, and that helps you develop an intervention strategy that is best met later in the comprehensive programming. Identify any systemic issues that are present for the kids, identify things that you're already doing, and then brainstorm things that you might do in the future. You want to move beyond things that are already in place. You want to try things that are new, that you believe might work, and that might have impact.
So this template and the one that we were looking at in the previous slide are just worksheets to help you go through the process and kind of help you reflect and think and kind of help you kind of challenge yourself with, so what's my rationale here? What am I thinking? How am I going to, communicate that this is an important need? These are worksheets. They're not necessarily shared in the RAMP application. At the end of the day, what's shared is the SMART goal that's based on this kind of reflective thinking. So when you use the rubric, you're able to kind of score your program goals. So on the left side, we have the 5 criteria for effective program goals. On the right side, we've given you 2 goals. The first one, all students will be able to identify 3 career interests and skills by the end of the year. Second, the number of students visiting the school clinic and citing anxiety as the issue will decline. So we would suggest that you evaluate these goals based on the criteria and give them a score of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, 6 being exemplary, and being able to kind of provide the rationale for why it's a 3. What's missing? Or if it's a 6, did they address all the criteria that's in the rubric? So we're going to suggest that you stop the PowerPoint at this time, look at the 2 goals, decide what you think it would earn in terms of the evaluation on the application. And then once you've done that, turn the PowerPoint back on, and Karen and I will share what we would give these goals and our rationale for that number.
So when you look at these goals, I think there's some things to pay attention to. I'm going to start at the bottom with the SMART format. There are pieces missing. By the end of the year is general. It doesn't completely tell you what year it is, where you started. It's sort of present, but not in its best possible sense. When you look at the second one, we don't have any idea when that one's going to happen. So there's some pieces that are missing there. I'm also going to talk about the results-oriented piece. That first goal where you're identifying 3 career interests and skills. I would challenge you to tell me, is that related to achievement, attendance, behavior? Well, it's related to career. I could certainly come up with a rationale for how knowing career interest can impact a student's achievement, attendance, and behavior, because those with clearly articulated career goals are probably going to have better achievement, attendance, and behavior. So therefore, I would probably rewrite that in terms of an achievement, attendance, or a behavior goal and use the career perspective as a way to get that goal. But as it stands, it's not well grounded in the 3 areas of achievement, attendance, behavior that ASCA recommends. The second goal, again, it's a valid thing to consider, and I think it's an important thing to consider, but students who are visiting the school clinic, by definition, are not in class. Well, that to me can represent an attendance. So let's write it in terms of attendance. When are they going? Is there a particular time of day? Is there a particular class that's missed? So again, the ideas behind these goals are valid, but I'm not sure that they are grounded well in achievement, attendance, and behavior, and I'm not sure they have all the components of SMART formatting.
And I think the other thing that, if you think about the worksheets that we looked at in the previous slides, so for number 2, how are you going to know that you made a difference with the kids visiting the school clinic in terms of decreasing the number? What's the baseline? You know, how many kids are visiting the school clinic? You want to know that. Is it really an issue? You know, and the same thing with the first one. What are we comparing? What's the metric that we're trying to impact? I mean, like Karen said, career development, career classroom lessons are a really good strategy. They're a great activity to help kids understand that school is important. It matters that they're in school every day, that they're behaving, and they're doing the work so they can demonstrate that they're learning. So it isn't about identifying the 3 careers that the goal is going to speak to. It's about improving attendance, behavior, or achievement based on your school data. Same thing with the students visiting the clinic. What's the baseline? And is this a relevant concern? Is this a priority? And it might be. It can be an issue, definitely. So if you were to take these goals and go back to the templates, you could see where you would be challenged in filling in all those blanks, and you'd have to make some adjustments. So in terms of a score, would probably be giving these goals a 2. Maybe in consultation with other reviewers, I might see the rationale to push it to a 3, but I think it's really missing a lot of the components of a SMART goal.
I agree. I would give it a 2.
But I think Karen made a really good point that we want to really emphasize. This is helping kids identify career interests, and the skills to do that is critical. We just want to link it to the outcome data, attendance, behavior, and achievement. Kids visiting the school clinic because they don't want to be in class, or there's some anxiety issues, needs to be addressed. That's a barrier to learning. It's just not written in a format that we can measure our impact.
So here are 2 examples of SMART goals. Again, I'm going to reference the implementation guide. There are many, many, many examples of goals that are written throughout this book beyond actually even just within the goal section of the book. So looking at the first one, by May 20th, the end of the school year, the number of students with 16 or more absences, 45 of them, will be reduced by 20% from 45 students during the previous year to 34 students during the subsequent year. So all you're doing is looking at how many of those students had 16 or more, which puts them at some critical, they're missing, almost 20% of the, 10% of the school year. So that's a valid group to target, and one of the ways that you can get at that is saying how many students did I have one year and how many did I have the following year. It's pretty clear what you're going to count.
So, and I think lots of folks will say, these were the kids that were in 9th grade who we don't see why they're going to change these paths. So we're going to start with those kids and say, last year they had 45, absences were at that 45 mark, and we want to reduce it. So you're really being able to judge, to evaluate your impact. And let us be clear, we're not suggesting that you be judged on whether or not you met the 20%. The model and the goal is about looking and reflecting at what kind of progress did you make. And if you didn't make progress, that's excellent information, because you want to be able to say, okay, let's got to tweak something. We don't want to continue this just because we thought it was important to do. If you look at the second goal, the same, it's going to be ditto. By the end of the school year, we've described what we want to increase. Clearly, it's the graduation rate from the previous school year. The other important thing on the slide that really is critical for later in the application to be able to provide a rationale, well, even for this section, is what data source is telling you that this is a need. You're not just creating this because you have a gut instinct, though your gut instinct may be very accurate. We want to ground our decisions in data and take away that, well, we think this might be a concern. And that helps legitimize our role in schools and gets stakeholders to see our incredible contribution to student success.
So the narrative with the program goals addresses how they were developed, how they address student learning, and whatever inequalities, and how they're grounded in data. So it's not necessarily about validating the goals, it's about how did they come to exist. So you're going to write a paragraph on the following, and we've identified those three things that are listed in the narrative as three things to address. So if I were writing this, I'd have a paragraph around how I developed the goals, the process I went through, the data I looked at, the school improvement plan that I considered, conversations with administrators. My next paragraph would be about why this matters so much, that it impacts student learning, that it addresses student inequalities, why this matters, for why I'm spending some of my time and energies around this goal and its related interventions and measurements. And then I would do another third paragraph about the data sources and what those mean and how that's led to the development of the goal. It's very clearly stated in the rubric what you need to write about. Follow it for your narrative and explain your processes.
So I think this is a really good place to kind of reinforce. You want to make sure you're always using the most current rubric, because the narrative might be tweaked a little bit, and you want to make sure you always look at the narrative, break it down into kind of the bullet points, or the statements that need to be addressed, and address those, and then you'll be in a much better place in terms of having RAMP be something that you can achieve. Goal pitfalls. So again, this is a reflective piece, to help you kind of, when you write your goals, think about, so are they in a SMART format? Are they measurable? Are they time-bound? If you look at your SMART goal and there's no end date, then it's not on the SMART goal format. Are they based on attendance, achievement, or behavior data? In a RAMP application, you have to share two to 3 goals. Share the ones that clearly are linked to achievement, attendance, and behavior data. You know, is the group clearly identified? And then I think a place where oftentimes there's confusion and folks don't do as well on their goals is they don't understand the difference specifically between perception data and outcome data. And this is where you really need to look at the Ask a National Model, and you really need to look at the National Model Implementation Guide, because they give you a very clear description of the difference between perception data and outcome data. They give you lots and lots of examples. You know, so very quickly, perception data is what the kids learn from you in terms of your interventions and time spent with them. What are the knowledge, what's the skills, what are the attitudes they have now that they didn't have before you started working with them. And outcome data is the connection to attendance, behavior, and achievement. The last thing we're going to kind of caution you about is don't write goals that are so big that it's impossible to manage them. And the more specific and concrete you are, the easier it is to measure the impact of those goals. But we're not saying you can't write a goal for all third graders. You can write a goal for all third graders. It's sometimes a little more difficult to manage that and look at the metrics, the outcomes around attendance, behavior, achievement.
The other thing I'd like to mention at this point is that goals do not represent everything you do as a part of your program. It is just the highlighted section of where you're being intentional about some measurements and some interventions. This is where you're targeting, and it's a way for you to demonstrate in a very clear, succinct, irrefutable way what you as a school counseling and the school counseling program in general has contributed, again, back to that school's mission around achievement, attendance, and behavior. So we hope this helps you with your goal writing. Reference the books and the website for additional support. It's possible. It's usually actually easier than you think it is if you'll use some of those worksheets to guide you.
And so thank you for joining us, and good luck.